Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today the video is about the Opera browser in English. And here on this channel you get the best tips to stay safe online. I also want to thank every new subscriber, every comment and all the feedback that helps me improve. And that's why today I decided to record this tutorial again in English and to speak more slowly. And also to compare opera with Vivaldi, because just like with Vivaldi is a very good alternative to opera. Let's get started right away and begin with Opera. Opera used to be a very big, well-known browser. It's still well-known, but it's not used as often as Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge. And by now it has also focused heavily on AI features. At times, it can also feel overloaded. And it's really just a matter of personal taste, I'd say. Here we can see the interface, so to speak. This is Opera's dashboard. Here we can set the weather. You can change it at any time, and of course you can also hide the suggestions down here, the recommendations from Opera, and then customize the start page individually. That means you can move things you don't need, like booking.com for example, out of the way. And then you have the option to add your own websites that you visit more frequently. That is, as I said, it's the same with all browsers, and for me both work according to the same principle, but I'll talk more about that later. And of course you also have the option to set the background. In the theme gallery, you can set the design sounds or set a normal classic background. That's still possible, of course. And you have the option to display news instead of the suggestions. As you can see here or below the suggestions. You can also show or hide the weather. This also works, of course, with the news and quick dial recommendations. It's the same principle everywhere in case that's of interest to you. But I personally think the weather feature is quite good. And we can also show or hide the Opera AI up here. For everyone who doesn't use it like me, it obviously makes more sense for Opera to be leaner here, which of course also means it can run faster, so to speak. Then here we have the option to block ads and trackers. I would definitely recommend that to you. That's also what my YouTube channel is primarily about, the topic. Browser security and the topic of cybersecurity in general. Opera does have a VPN, but it's not as good as, for example, NordVPN. It's actually more like, well, they now also have a paid VPN, but it's not as high quality as many other providers. And you can test the whole thing for free. I think it's 7 days, and then in terms of price, it's relatively similar to most providers. So we can set it as the default browser if we want to. But I think, as far as I know, Opera already does that automatically to some extent. But in any case, there is the option to set Opera as the default browser. Up here we have the workspaces. That means we can then divide things into different categories. We can work with different categories. For example, shopping, gaming, business, whatever suits you. I don't work with these categories myself. So of course you can also hide them, and that applies to all the other things here as well. That means you have the option when this opens up to hide the workspaces in my sidebar. They then disappear completely. Of course it looks a bit empty, but well, that's just the downside of the sidebar. And you can also show or hide ChatGPT, Gmail, Google Calendar, WhatsApp, and all the other messengers, depending on which messengers you actually use. For example, Facebook or X. I think that doesn't make much sense for many people. I think that most people actually only have WhatsApp, Telegram, and maybe just TikTok in there. At least that's how it was for me. I'm no longer active on Instagram. And of course, I use channels like Slack for my business, where I'm obviously active. But there's also the option to use all the other messengers that Operati suggests here, connect with them, and then chat via the browser. This feature is unique. No other browser has it like this. And it was also important to me to convey in this video what makes Opera unique. The question, of course, is, do you really need it? It's probably more interesting for gamers or for people who do a lot of messaging back and forth. But in general, most people probably won't really need it. And I think a lot of people actually write messages on their phones anyway. Exactly. Now we also have the option here to display the player, Spotify, and My Flow. For everyone who listens to a lot of music, it's of course an interesting feature to listen directly through the browser. And with My Flow, you can also share it on your phone in a current browser session. We have the speed dial, which means we can activate or hide the speed dial here as well. We can show or hide the bookmarks, the personalized news, and the pinboards. I have the pinboards enabled. I'll talk more about them later, as well as about Flow. We can also display the downloads. They will then appear down here. Exactly. And this way you can customize and personalize everything to your liking. And the pinboards are actually pretty stylish. You can save things here, for example, vision boards on topics like cars or ships. Or in my case, I have art ships here, but these could just as well be houses or anything else. Travel destinations, it could also be a trip you've taken, but you can just as easily save websites or technical books. You can create a new pinboard for all sorts of things and design this pinboard however you like. For example, inspiration, web design, just as an example. And then you can add websites here, add books, content, quotes, anything you want. And it's actually a great thing. It's like a collection of websites, an inspiration of content that you can collect online. Here too, of course, the question is, do you really need this in the age of AI, since many people use notebook LMs? And I don't use this feature in either Microsoft Edge or Opera, but it's definitely something that makes Opera unique. And up here we have the current battery status, the option to take a screenshot of our current screen or of a website. For example, if we like something on Amazon, as I see here right now, we can simply take a snapshot and photograph this product, describe it, and so to speak, create a screenshot of it. Here we can then link our Opera account with the smartphone, and we also have the option to make various settings here. That means these are the settings that go a bit deeper. Compared to the interface I just showed you, this concerns the synchronization with the phone, the functions that Opera has already preset, which could also be left as they are. But that's everything I've just explained here in the sidebar for the most part. The pinboards, the player, the quick access, and so on. As I said, synchronization, if you want to log in with your Opera account and then connect your phone to it. Early bird, for anyone who also wants to know what new features Opera will be releasing soon. And then here we also have the option to improve video optimization to use Opera AI or not to use it. The same as here in the sidebar. Exactly. And of course, there's also the option to save payment methods, addresses, and to use Opera's password manager. But as I already mentioned in the last video, I wouldn't do it. I clearly recommend NordPass or Keeper, a classic password manager, not a password manager in the browser. We can activate the VPN. Then we'll be connected through another country, through a tunnel, for example, the Netherlands, and then in other words, you'll be identified via this different IP address. Privacy and security here, the highest setting is already enabled. That means you can block ads and trackers here. You can delete browser data here and manage third-party cookies. As for Opera's own security, you don't have as many configuration options as you do with Firefox or Prey. And that's why this part will be relatively short in this video, because, as I said, you can only block ads and trackers here. By the way, it's almost exactly the same with Wiley. There aren't any more configuration options. And of course, you also have to keep in mind that Opera comes from China. That's simply a fact. Opera is based in China. They were sold to China, but they also have an office in Norway. It was originally a Norwegian browser, but as I said, it also has an office in China. If you're okay with that, that's fine. If you're not okay with that, you probably won't be happy with it. We can change the Google search to Yahoo, DuckDuckGo, Amazon, Bing, and Wikipedia. For anyone who wants something different, like quant or publicity, they'll either have to try to add the Chrome add-ons via the extension, which is a bit complicated. I would say it's easier to just use Start Page or Quant directly on the homepage. That's the best option. And yes, I think most people still use Google anyway, at least that's the case for me, or maybe even Bing. It's only a small fraction who use DuckDuckGo. That's why it's also listed along with Yahoo, and an even smaller fraction use Quant or Start Page. When starting, we can set what should happen, whether to begin with the homepage or with a new tab. And for languages, we can choose German, English, Chinese, French, Russian, or whatever else. And with that, we're actually already done. Here we can also manage the downloads. And that's basically all there is at the moment. So what really makes Opera unique as a final conclusion is, of course, the live backgrounds, which are new. That was also some of the feedback that maybe it doesn't go over so well, I would say. Yes, it's a bit annoying that these live backgrounds, as the name suggests, are actually live. That means you can really set here whether you want a calm or rather a disturbing background. You can have an animated background here with music, with browser sounds, with all sorts of things. And this aurora will then be applied. And yes, to be honest, I also find it annoying, I have to say. What actually bothers me about it is that you hear every click, every keystroke when you type on the keyboard, every letter. Of course, you can also deactivate the browser sounds and keyboard sounds, but in principle, it just feels very restless and also loud. Gamers like that, and that's why Opera has even developed a special gaming browser where all of this is even more intense and noticeable. In that case, it definitely makes sense. And Opera also has another browser that helps you to be more mindful. For example, when working on your laptop in a home office. Exactly, but there is also an alternative, a kind of offshoot of Opera, and that's Vivaldi. And I actually used Vivaldi for over 8 years. The reason I decided against Vivaldi is a bit trivial for many, perhaps, but it really reminds me a lot of my old money inside a blog which I have moved on from. And I wanted to start something completely new. I decided on my cybersecurity blog in English, and then also decided to work with several browsers in parallel. Sometimes with Chrome, sometimes with Brave, sometimes with Edge. I'm not committing to any one browser right now, and that's why I always find it cool to try out new features. To be honest, I use Opera relatively rarely, and as I said, I used Vivaldi as my main browser for a long time. Yes, basically it's exactly the same here. Here you can set your favorite sites. What I really like about Vivaldi is that you truly have every option to customize these sites and the backgrounds yourself. You can set them individually. That means you go to the theme gallery here, and then you can choose in the gallery what kind of image you want. There are quite a few included, very cool modern backgrounds, also for gamers, and of course, some simple color backgrounds. There's really a lot you can do and get out of it. And what I also think is cool, which is a relatively new feature, is that you can sort here by shopping, by travel, and well, with the vintage dashboard, you can basically create your own dashboard here, design it. And of course, you can also add new folders, for example, cloud. Sorry, not cloud, I just have AI on my mind all the time. Of course, cloud and design. Well, these are just suggestions where you can work within this thing and add your reading line accordingly. Or you can also add individual vintage items. But that's a really cool feature that Vivaldi offers, and that makes Vivaldi unique. Vivaldi actually originated from Opera. Joe Tetzer is his name, I believe, and he worked at Opera for a long time as well. And with Vivaldi, he promises a better internet, a free internet. And for anyone interested in a European alternative, Vivaldi is absolutely top-notch. Here too, with the sidebar, you can set up your email address, fully synchronize it, manage calendars, and manage reading lists. You can also add your own things, for example. I used to have Todoist in there for a long time, but it works just as well with X and with many other tools. I also had DeepL in there, Google Translate, it's all possible. And there's even an automatic translator included here. And what I also found to be a great feature was the notes function. Here you can actually write notes, the notes you want, and then manage them directly in the browser. Yes, it's really a very cool, modern browser, which is based in Norway, but it does have a rather small community, to be fair. You could call it a niche browser, but still, Vivaldi offers more customization options than any other browser. As you can already see here, at a glance, you can customize the entire start page, the whole dashboard, you can sync it with your phone, with your tablet, and you can change the appearance. I don't want to go into every detail now, as that would go beyond the scope of this video. Exactly, and you can set the themes, choose the background, either what Vivaldi suggests or directly select one from the theme gallery and then swap out the theme. And of course, through the speed dial, we also have the option to display the start page or a specific page and to activate or deactivate the widgets. Exactly, with the tabs. There you can also set how you want them, where you want them, on the right, at the bottom, or on the side. But I basically never change these settings in any browser because I always work with the tabs at the top. But the function is there, and you can already see at a glance here that Vivaldi offers so many options for customizing the tabs, the panels, and the address bar more than any other browser. And also to manage bookmarks and change search engines. There are also significantly more search engines included here. Ikvan, Startpage, Wikipedia, DuckDuckGo, Yahoo, and Bing. And Vivaldi also regularly has interesting partnerships, including with Startpage and with Bruton from Switzerland, Bruton Mail. And yes, that's also how Vivaldi finances itself, of course. You can view the quick commands here. You can then take a look at them at a glance. You can also customize and set your own keyboard shortcuts and mouse gestures. And for us, however, there is still an important point, namely the topic of data protection and security. Vivaldi was criticized for a long time for recording IP addresses and not being so good for privacy. And my intuition was correct that Vivaldi is one of the best browsers for privacy. And you can see it here at a glance. Protection against phishing and malware. but it is based on Chromium. It gives you the ability to block ads and trackers, and it also shows you exactly which ads and which trackers have been blocked. And of course, you can adjust all of this individually as well. The only drawback that for me, it's not really a drawback, but it is noticeable. Vivaldi keeps the browser history for a long time, and everything remains saved, like passwords and so on. Of course, you can change that here, but on the one hand, I actually find it super practical because then I often only have to log into websites and password managers once, for example, through the Room add-ons. And as I said, you can set that here, but it's just practical because you have everything ready to access right away. And you can also manage performance here as well as downloads. That's pretty much the same in all browsers. We also have websites here that we can customize individually, including the appearance of the websites. Of course, this also applies to the start page and the dashboard. And here we can actually also link an email, account, or a calendar with Vivaldi. I tried that once. It is then listed here as an additional section accordingly. Or you can access and check your emails, for example, from Thunderbird directly in Vivaldi. So in my opinion, Vivaldi is definitely worth a look, a recommendation. You can also see it here where I am, my current weather conditions, and how many ads and trackers have been blocked. Currently 0. Because I just installed this browser, but if you surf on several sites, it can easily show 100 or 200 here, or of course even more over time. This widget can also be hidden, enlarged, reduced, or removed. So as I said, there is no browser except Vivaldi that offers you so many flexible customization options when it comes to the design and appearance of a browser. And that was also one of the reasons why I worked with Vivaldi for so long, because I can set everything down to the smallest detail. Yes, maybe you can make use of this alternative. I'm glad you gave me your attention, and I'll see you in the next video.